All righty, let me find the agenda. We actually have a very full agenda today. We've been stirring up all sorts of kind of stuff here. There's the agenda. Can you guys read that, or is that just poorly too small? Let's see here.
I'm not seeing
Where
anything
is it?
yet.
Yeah, not sharing
Well,
yet.
then there you go. User error. Hold on.
Definitely too small.
Yeah. Look, it's about 4 pixels on the bottom of your screen. We can see that there.
Perfect. Now I see the
Yeah, we go.
Yep.
Sorry, I forgot an important detail. I pushed the share button to do anything. I mean, I can see it. I don't know what the problem is.
I'm not sure how much I have on topic number 2. We went over that last time.
Yeah, we're talking. I think the only thing that we were going to add was the directory stuff that I think Mitch was talking about. And I think you may have done some work there, but just to check.
I had a little bit in there, and
just a quick check.
That was.
Because I was going to find out if I needed to pull, if we should finally pull that into the main GitHub as well. I don't think I've done that yet. That's a real light topic, Andrew. Nothing big.
No worries.
Okay. Mark is here. Hey. Great. Oh, I'm glad we got Mark here. We have a topic that is going to be near and dear to his heart in this discussion.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, surviving.
Surviving. Yeah, we missed you on our last call, so we've been scheming over here. So I'm glad you're back.
Awesome.
Yeah, don't let us scheme too far without you.
No, I like it. Go for it.
Okay, so I got 5 topics. Forrest, I sent out a paper. I think I sent the link out. Anyway, it's on this. It's also in the email I sent to you guys earlier. On this wonderful document that we're going to talk about, this DoD document. We'll talk a little bit. I think Forrest has some points to make on that, which I think are relevant here, and help us understand what we want to, how we want to position with it, how we want to deal with it. Zero trust and XDR have been 2 things I've been thinking about also in general. So, that could overlap with what Forrest is going to cover. Then, as I said, Andrew's got we'll have some real minor quick conversations on the threat intelligence. We left off last week with, a little glossary had to be updated, I think. And then I think I'm ready to pull it into the GitHub, but we'll talk. And then Adam's going to take, and I'll work with you, Adam. I know you started putting some new GitHub projects together on the SACM project, but I thought just a quick overview of what you're intending to do would be helpful because I think I know what you're doing, but I'd like to kind of quickly chat about it. And then Dave, I guess Dave and I guess, are going to talk about some discussion we had, which we need your help, Mark, and talking about OpenC2 and OCA and all that good stuff. And then maybe, Forrest, we may not have time, but if we do, we'll continue the ontology work you've been driving. Is that okay for an agenda?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good enough. Okay, Forrest, let's start with the new DoD Zero Trust Architecture document, which is in this, it's attached to the email I sent to you guys. But I think it has some interesting relevance and discussion of what we're doing. So I know, Forrest, you were looking at saying this, we think that the group ought to kind of have a quick chat about this. So you want to take us through that?
Sure. So I brought it up, I sent it around for 2 reasons. One is just for general awareness.
Mm-hmm.
This came out in February 21. And so this is the reference architecture. So this is not just hey, zero trust is a great concept. DoD encourages it. This is intended to be, it's version 1, right? So it's the first release of this. All plans, no plans ever survive contact with commercial industry.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be the reference architecture with several different components. And so I just wanted to bring it up to industry's awareness that this is out here, and this is intended to be like the model for when anybody's doing any solutioning for the DoD, anywhere in the DoD. This is, I don't know if they've said yet, you have to produce artifacts that equate to every single one of the OVs and SVs that are in here. But I know you generally have to, there's actually Stig OV template. Well, anyway, you have to comply with, or you're going to reply with this reference architecture, standards here. It's produced by DISA. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Defense Information Systems Agency. So they handle all of the unclassified level, open to the internet level, and secret level, basically, communication systems and information systems for the Department of Defense. And then NSA, so it's a team between DISA and NSA. NSA handles a lot of the national security systems. So that would be some of the higher classification systems, the cybersecurity for the higher classification systems in the DoD, but also across other branches of government that have highly secure communications. And then, of course, NSA, just their cybersecurity branch or their cybersecurity divisions, they do also help with general cybersecurity and hygiene across the federal government, and whoever industry partners want to partner with them on that. So this is it's 170 something painful pages, but in addition to the OV1s and the SV1s and the CV1s capability. I don't know what a CV. What does a CV stand for? I don't know. Capability overview.
Yes.
Okay, capability overviews 1 and 2. You'll also notice I've got some taxonomies in here and some terms and definition lists. So the second reason I bring it up is there might be some good stuff we can pull from here for ontology work.
Yeah.
And then so we could there's a glossary of terms on page 98. So we could look at some of those. I don't know if those are what the sources are, other than this would at least be an official DoD NSA definition if we wanted to rely on those in those cases where we don't have other terms. But there's a 50, 60 terms on here that we can look to as a source to integrate into our work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Activities definitions as well. What else is in here? Like I said, there's some taxonomies that we might be able to leverage.
They had some operational activity models. I was looking at some of these. They look interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mainly for awareness, bunch of acronyms so we can pull from. What's this? Appendix Alpha is the capability taxonomy and descriptions. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's actually not a taxonomy. That's interesting. Well, it's kind of a taxonomy. And that was about it. Did anybody have any questions on the document's purpose or provenance or anything like that? Happy to answer what I can. All right.
Yeah, no questions. But I do remember maybe somebody, I think it was on these meetings, when Mitch Thomas from Tripwire was bringing this up at some point, and we got into a discussion about how much the OCA architecture should care about zero trust architectures. And I think where he was going is probably where you're going at this point, is basically, we have to care about it insofar as whatever we come up with is very likely going to have to operate within a zero trust architecture. Is that where you're coming from on this?
Well, that's okay. So that's from a larger OCA philosophical standpoint, and I would suggest, yeah, probably. I mean, in as much as it becomes a requirement, then whatever we would suggest as far as standards and such for interoperability, that it could operate in the zero trust framework. But I don't think that that's too hard to reconcile. Right. This is more of a philosophy about putting your networks together, and so that reference architecture level to ensure that with the idea of authentication at basically every freaking step of the way. Yeah. But this is no you've got the seam. I'm looking on page. I'm looking on the OV1 on page 12.
12. I'll get you there.
Yeah, page 12. That looks kind of similar to the type of things that work. I mean, it's a general architecture. These things have to work together, and the only thing here is just saying that you have to do those verifications and trust and identify at each page. So so we would have standards and stuff that we would be promoting standards that these components would be using that would improve the interoperability between these components. But I think it would also help achieve the goals of zero trust. So I don't think there's anything that's like potentially conflicting between the two different endeavors. Does that jive with most people?
Yes, you're looking at the OV1, and I was looking at the general principles on page 18. And yeah, I mean, it's a design approach. So yeah, you'd want to design systems in alignment with this, even if there weren't any mandate.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think, increasing the standardization across the things talking to each other would theoretically should actually be facilitating the implementation of the zero trust reference architecture.
That's true. Yeah,
Implementation architecture.
I think so.
And if it isn't, then we probably need to go back and square one. So yeah, and so where I'm specifically, that was from a philosophical point, and I guess where I was going is we've got, if we get to this afternoon, or as we press forward on ontology development, we've got a bunch of stuff to work with already, as far as our our architecture overviews and use cases that we've been developing. But I think as we get through that, we can then kind of turn to this and see if there's additional components of this, or as we're developing it, if there's some stuff like in those glossary of terms and such that we can pull from to like, oh, there's a great definition right there, let's just use that. That saves us hunting and pecking, and it keeps us aligned with the federal government, which is not necessarily a requirement, but it's always useful for those of us who have customers in the federal government space, like all of us, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, that was it.
All right.
Any other questions
Yeah, very good.
on this one?
That's good stuff.
Yeah, it is good
Little
stuff. I
light
got
reading.
to more. Yeah, some light reading at night for everybody. Yeah, but it does look interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably useful information just for you to bring back to your teams if
Yeah.
that's the first scene of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things I've been looking at, and zero trust is one piece, but the XDR is the other, and the themes on these, and you see this here, is the ability to do better security involves better collaboration across the security control points. I mean, I think that comes across again and again and again. And these new modern, you call it what you want, zero trust or XDR, I just call them the modern approach to security, and they'll be more modern tomorrow. But they continue to stress that, right? It's not just a single point. You can't just worry about LDAP servers for directory access and be done with it, right? You can't just worry about application level security, because there's the other pieces here, the resources and the data. So I think that continues to bring home a message that people are figuring out that the collaborative nature of security is required in order to pull together knowledge points that we have gathered across these different places.
Yeah, so that was the main points I wanted to make. If anyone says anything, otherwise we'll turn it over to topic number 2.
Topic number 2. All right, so as I said, this one will be a quick one, Andrew. I think when Mitch put in a PR or an issue, I guess, right, to put some glossary in there, and I believe you took care of that. But you want to give us a checkpoint of where we are, just as an update?
Sure. Give me 1 second here so I can bring up. So this is the I'm just gonna drop this in the chat, because we all got web browsers and there's no reason you need to be looking at mine in particular. So I did submit a PR. That's the latest version. We included that section with a description of 4 users, Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dave. That's our product manager, our software engineering manager, and then 2 different SOC analysts, one tier 1 and tier 2. I also stole some quick definitions of a SIM and a tip to throw in there. So those should be in place, and the PR just updated automatically as I checked in the branch. So we should, if that gets accepted, those will get pulled in automatically. And for anybody, just take a look at the chat and you can see the latest version of that doc. So I think that was the only real big content comment that we had gotten.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Okay, so if you guys take a look at that, I'll go ahead and bring the pull request in so we can bring it into the base. If everybody's okay with that. So it looked fine to me. I took a look at it this morning. So thanks
And
for
if
adding
anybody
that.
hasn't,
Yeah.
no worries. If anybody has any other issues, please let me know. You can just put another comment in that PR, and I'll jump on that.
Cool. Yeah, the only other comment I had is to put the SOAR system in here because that was the only other one we have. Since SOAR and TIP.
Yeah, I was thinking that since we don't actually, the source system isn't a part of the use case yet. I was waiting to do that until we explicitly pull that in. I didn't want to start just describing, the
That's a
world
good
of
point.
stuff.
That's a good point. Okay, so maybe that's what I'll do is I'll add the SOAR. It's in here. I just haven't pulled it out. But there is a SOAR use case somewhere in here if I remember right.
My question is, are we mixing metaphors with Bob in Initech and Alice who works with Dilbert?
Maybe.
Are we mixing?
Entirely possible.
Yeah, it's accidental.
I couldn't think of any office-based products that they had besides the Y2K compliant stuff.
Okay. I'm just trying to think. I don't remember there was an Alice who worked at Initech, but of course there's an Alice who works with Dilbert. So okay.
Well, the Alice thing is just the our classic alphabetic users, Alice, Bob, Charlie, Dave, on down from all the encryption explanations.
That's right.
I am not creative when I come up with names at all.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I think that when I look through the use case, I mean, for example, it says a tier 1 analyst, and we probably want to name them Alice or Bob or Charlie or Dave, or maybe that's the SOAR person. I'll look through it, but I would like to round it out. So I'll take what you've done.
Sure. Well, we did specifically.
Yeah.
We did specifically name them. I
think
Charlie is the tier 1, and Dave is the tier 2.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe I just got to cross correlate it because I'm looking through the text and it has it doesn't have some like a tier 1 analyst instead of saying Bob in it or something. It just says a tier 1 analyst. So I just want to personalize it to be consistent with what you did. So I guess the tier 1 analyst is Charlie, isn't he? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll put Charlie in there. It says the analyst returns, things like that. I want to just make it really focused.
Sure.
So we'll map it to what you've done. So because you give me a basis to work off of. So I'll update that. Update personas, people. And then add the use case for SOAR. I'll put that in here as well. All right, great. Thanks for doing that. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
All right. You want to give us a couple words, Adam, on, I know you're doing some work with Bill, and I know you did a GitHub, and as soon as you open a GitHub, I get an email from JK saying somebody's playing with GitHub. And so that's how we saw it coming on. But you want to just give a couple words? I think I know what you're doing, but on the SCAP stuff, and now you've got the SACM stuff. Did you kind of want to talk about what you guys are thinking?
Sure, absolutely. And I have David and David here to keep me honest because they were involved. Well, I guess Mike is here as well. So the three of you can keep me honest where I stray. So basically, yeah, there was a little bit of background. First, the SCAP version 2 effort had kind of several prongs to it, like several prongs on that fork, and one of them was an endpoint data collection architecture that we were looking at in OCA, right? We brought the two groups together. We said, hey, you know what? This endpoint data collection architecture work could be possibly done under OCA's umbrella. And that looked like it was going forward because it made sense. And then the executive order came out in May, I think, the one from May 12th, if I'm remembering correctly. And NIST basically looked at all the different things that they were doing. And maybe I'm overstating it, but they essentially said, you know what? We need to focus on payload first. And we can't really be spending time on this architecture work. So, strictly speaking, I think the endpoint data collection work that SCAP version 2 is looking at is now kind of dropped. Like they are not putting cycles behind it. Right. So what's happening basically, because that endpoint data collection architecture was essentially an instantiation of the work that was going on in IETF SACM, we, CIS, got together with some people from Michael's organization and said, you know what? It would be really cool if we just kept moving forward with this. We can call it something else. I talked to JK about it, and he seemed to agree and didn't object to the idea of moving forward no matter what the name is, because we want to have something that does posture assessment in here. So that's what we are working on at this point. We decided we would call it Posture Attribute Collection and Evaluation, which is a tidy little acronym, PACE, which is really good for marketing as well, actually, but that's a different story. So all I did last week, I think it was create, maybe it was this week on Monday, create that repository. We are still figuring out who actually is going to maintain that repository. We are still figuring out exact scope of what it is we're going to build. It is likely going to follow the SACM architecture and take from the endpoint data collection work that was started with the NIST SCAP v2 effort. So like this week, we're all kind of level setting because Bill and I made, I want to say 3 or 4 updates to the architecture draft over the past few weeks. So it kind of, it surpassed everybody's understanding. So, I don't mean that in a bad way. I think you understand what I mean. Like the draft is further ahead than people have caught up to at this point. So we're taking this week to kind of catch up on that draft, meeting again on Monday. And that's really when we're going to start talking about the scope issues and how we're going to design this thing. Because the prototype that MITRE came out with was essentially just a proof that, yeah, we can send these messages back and forth. It wasn't necessarily a designed architecture with designed components that can be reused in libraries and all that kind of stuff. So I'll pause for a second for 2 things. 1, please keep me honest, guys. And 2, any questions or comments or anything like that? And actually, I'll apologize as well if I wasn't supposed to just make that repo.
No, you're fine. You're fine. That's no problem.
Okay, good.
Well, first, you gave credit to Bill for the acronym, right? Because that really appealed to me. It is meaningful and snazzy too. So
that was Bill. That was Bill. Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Adam. And this is Mike Rosa. Sorry. So thanks for giving that quick summary. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation on Monday with everybody.
Yeah, me too. Don't know how quick it was, but thanks.
No, it was very, very good. I kind of thought that's where we were going, Adam, but thanks for getting us up to date on that. I knew the pivot was happening. I just didn't know exactly what the pivot was. You were still working it out last we talked. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. And if anybody thinks of questions later, reach out. Contact Mike. He knows it all.
You burned out Bill, so now it's Mike. Is that the idea? Okay.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. We're just
Adam, you sound like you're going through a tunnel, so you must be losing connection. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure both Adam and I will be happy to answer questions.
Okay, that sounds great. That sounds great. All right, thanks for that, Adam. I do. One of the things I am going to do is I'm trying to sketch up from our side of the OCA architecture. Where are we going with this? The stuff we have, and we are making progress. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the key thing I'm missing, which is the ontology. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But one of the things I've been in my head is trying to put a proposal together of what would an OCA prototype look like, and I want to kind of align it with what you're doing so they relate to each other. And I've got some ideas on that, but I think that could be, those 2 pieces along with the ontologies, I think giving us something more substantial, I'd say, in OCA that we can kind of talk about and relate to, and people can better understand how we're approaching the interoperability collaboration. So just FYI, I'm kind of thinking about that as you're doing what you're doing. Okay, next, anybody else have questions on Adam Stock before we move to the number 4? We're being so productive today. Okay, Now this was an email, Mark, this is where you have to pay attention because this is going to be interesting. I've been having a debate back and forth. I went back through the, I guess it's still called the OpenDXL ontology database, and I was looking through it, and I've been digging into OpenC2. And the more I read it, the more I found like overlap, and I was really confused about why we're having both. So I was getting into conversations with the Daves on this, because what I want to do is about kick off whoever's interested to work with me on defining the data formats and the commands, because I think we've identified them. We have for a little while, but I want to move forward to start putting together the, what is the messages and the responses and that kind of stuff for the stuff we've identified in the architecture now for a while, and move that forward. So we ended up in a discussion about OpenC2 and OCA, and I thought, Dave, the way I would do this is if you're okay with it, I would put up your latest email to share with the group, because you and I were chatting and we said we probably want to get the rest of the group involved at this point in the conversation. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Just going into it, I'd say this is sort of integrally related. 3 and 4 are almost the same topic in my mind.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let me, so anyway, the discussion, I'll summarize my little conversation down there, and then David, if you can summarize yours that you answered to me.
Sure.
So what I was looking at is, as we now understand what Forrest's work is doing, where that's leading us, right? That gave us a certain layer of consistency, terminology, and as he's been talking about, machine readable, understanding of the environment we're working in. I think that's a layer. And I think that can continue to progress, and we'll continue to run, work sessions on that. But I still said, okay, but I still need to get down to that data layer. I need to start, also in parallel defining the messages or the actions that we've started identifying in the architecture. So I was kind of looking at it and trying to layer it. And as you can see in the discussion I was having with David is, we still need to architect this information so we can collaborate. The backdrop is going to be a message bus, right? We know that we don't want to have a publish subscribe kind of environment, although that's up for debate. But it's my mind is the way we've been talking. I've been thinking that's the way we want to operate. But in order to do that, we started looking at, well, okay, then if we start defining data, what would it look like? And then I went into the OpenC2 stuff, and then we already know we have overlap, like the discussions on deny versus block, and we've had a couple places we've identified it, and I started thinking about, well, why do we need the OpenDXL ontology? Why don't we just take the OpenC2 stuff and embellish it, enhance it, and move it forward? And so what I did do, Mark, is I did pull from the OpenDXL ontology. There was a couple of things in there about what was unique about it over OpenC2, and those are the discussions I brought up with the Daves, and said, well, can OpenC2 do the things and limitations that were described in that text? And that's one discussion. And I think, Dave, if you want to talk a little bit about that, I want to turn it over to you. We can. But at the end of the day, it was, we thought that if we did take the OpenC2 stuff and just took what existed today and started embellishing it, we thought we can build, the message content and the actions and the events through that. And we wouldn't really need the unique OCA ontology. And again, keeping it simple, having one project versus the two and trying to relate them made my head hurt less. So I thought that was kind of nice. But that's what I want to talk about with this group is, are we missing anything if we just said, let's look at OpenC2 as our basis to drive the messaging, content, actions, and defining that level of verbiage there, and then drive it forward. So that was the debate we've been having in the background as I started looking deeper into what we had. So David, you want to take it from there and kind of give your perspective?
Yeah, I guess my thought process was, taking a step up. We had the SCAP V2 prototype added as an OCA project. We said, can we do this as a project to have open source collaboration and all that? And it seemed great because OCA has a big membership and all that, and collaborating on these things would be great to demonstrate usefulness and all that. Well, there hasn't been a lot of progress, and so I was wondering, what it is that would solve problems that people actually want to solve. And so that was part, that's the gist of this message here. You know, one of the articles I was reading about saying, well, enterprise architecture is kind of an ivory tower thing, or it can be that, and it just, you produce shelfware and it's nice, but it doesn't actually get used. And so, you know, my question is, you know, we've got the zero trust architecture, we've got OCA here as a collaboration of companies. What can we produce that isn't just shelfware? And, you know, I don't have a good answer to that, but, you know, one of the recommendations in those articles was don't try to develop a complete architecture firsthand before actually testing any ideas. And so I view enterprise architecture kind of as an analogy for ontology. And I don't know if I'm, you know, misconflating those terms, but it seems like, yes, if you want to categorize everything in the world, you do it with an ontology. But if you have a particular project that you want to work on, you have to actually get down into the messages and the data and the use cases that solve that project. So they have to work hand in hand, rather than, you know, designing an architecture and ontology first before you start doing any prototyping. So a push for, you know, for working those two efforts in parallel, and a push for asking ourselves, what is OCA's purpose in life? It's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? So I don't have any answer for that. But it would be nice if there were a way to determine what the members want. So I'll just leave it at there. The other thing is, yeah, you mentioned that when the initial prototype software came in, it demonstrated, you know, messages going back and forth, but those messages weren't real content. They didn't do anything except demonstrate that one box could talk to another box over OpenDXL. So we need to actually figure out what the message content would be. And so that's the data views that Russ and I were talking about, you know, the actual structures that go back and forth and satisfy the needs of the use case. So, and Dave Lemire has, you know, been following this activity, and he was, you know, looking at the SACM architecture, and he's put together a whole set of ideas for moving on there, and I think it'd be good if he can share those slides with the group.
Yeah, can I jump in a second? I'm back.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you recall, so first of all, I'm in agreement with your recommendation there as far as like doing an iterative process. If you recall, when I gave the, you know, ontologies 101, I went through our cosine process. It's, you start simple and iterate. So, what I've been thinking, and I don't know if maybe I didn't articulate it well, or if maybe we weren't on the call when we had this discussions, is this use case that we're you know, we're kind of breaking down and modeling out. We would, you know, that's as far as we would go with this use case and this general architecture that we've done so far. We just modeled, we create the ontology that helps us to articulate that. We don't go further in the ontology development until we actually kind of do a use case of the ontology on the use case. How exactly we would implement that's going to be a good question. You know, what I would envision is someone would have data about something that they would want to give semantic meaning to, in order for different applications to better understand it and to link maybe data between disparate databases. And those are the types of sample use cases that ontologies are useful for. So we have to get, in order to actually do something with it, you have to get down to the data level, and the data is transferred back and forth in the different message formats and different database structures that we are creating standards for. So we would theoretically be able to show a linkage between the standardized knowledge model and the standardized data structures that are being used to transmit data. And then someone would have to say, okay, then what am I going to be able to do with this new knowledge I can create based on the ontology? So the simplest use for it is to create a better articulated model of the world so that we have a better, clear understanding between all of us and the computer of what the actual system, cybersecurity system architecture looks like. That in itself, sometimes people find useful, but then you can actually, now implement the ontology in a way, by way of semantically enriching your data so that you can get more meaning out of the data that we're passing back and forth. So that would be a laudable goal.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That was a key point. You semantically enrich the data that you've already got. And I know I've been working on an information modeling tool, and one of the comments from the public was, well, why aren't you using RDF instead of this data modeling language? And my response was, they do two different things. One defines the data, and the other adds the semantic meaning on top of it.
One defines the domain of knowledge. The other one defines your data schemas and structures for holding your data. Yes, and transmitting your data.
Yes.
But you got to do both.
Yeah.
Right.
In order to make, sometimes people look at ontologies and like, oh, just looking at the ontology is useful for them to understand their domain of pursuit in a logical way. But that's just, creating a common framework that you can do on a whiteboard. But one of the, the additional benefits, if you've done an RDF or an OWL-based ontology, is now the machine can understand it the same way that you understand it. And that usually has added benefits for dealing with the data that you're collecting that's actually describing your real world instances. So we would like to get to that level of usefulness if possible. So you got to have both.
Right.
So I don't know. I honestly don't know what it's going to look like. I just know that there seem to be a lot of use cases that we have about dealing with disparate data stored in disparate data systems. And at minimum, you can use an ontology to create a common semantic meaning between all those data elements so that you can now map them together, whether it's in this database or that database. You can suck them into one knowledge graph and they can have all the same meaning between the different data sources. Some people find that useful as well. Do entity resolution. Is the target of this attack the same computer? I have this information on the target box. I have that information on you have this information on the target box in your system based on the threat intelligence that you collected in your different platforms. I don't know exactly if it's the same computer, but if I can semantically align all the data that you collected in your threat intelligence system or your endpoint security system with all of the data that I've collected in my other system that collects similar data, now I might be able to do a better job of entity resolution and determine, oh, we're looking at the same target, same attack.
Yep.
So that was actually something that I demonstrated from the Precisely folks, and that we could also demonstrate with Cambridge Semantics capabilities.
And just to take that one step further, I think that is a precursor to getting to real event-driven architecture between these heterogeneous things. That given the state of the system, when an event occurs on some system, a detection, for example, a notification about the detection on a given system is published, and then a bunch of different loosely coupled systems publish automatically based on that notification what they know about that system, even though they might be, storing and identifying that system or storing information about that given system differently. That resolution that would be possible, so that things just publish, they don't have to be queried.
Yeah, I don't know if that was helpful. But yeah, I mean, we definitely don't want to keep, and I apologize if somehow I gave that impression. We don't want to keep going on ontology development until some endless point. None of us really have the time for that anyways. What I was envisioning is we kind of get through this use case we've done, and which I mean, the use case in that it also touches on all the points within that kind of representative architecture. We just get through that and say, okay, we've kind of modeled this stuff out now. Now let's look at all these different data formats and data sources that we have with collect information about these components and these actions that occur. Let's figure out how to, because we could do very simple. Here, let me show you like what a simple thing that you can do here. I guess is that the point we're at, or yeah, I guess we are, because
Yeah,
let me. Can I share a screen? I'm on the web. Can I share my screen?
Should be able to, yeah.
Let's see here.
Do you have a little share button down the bottom?
Let's take a look. Share, yay.
Finally got you on the right network, Forrest.
Select window or screen. Screen, which one's screen one? It's not telling me which one's screen. Nope, I don't want to share screen one. I want to share screen two. Allow. All right. All right.
Yeah, got your calendar.
Yeah. Documents. I think it's over here. Oh, no, hold on. Downloads. It's on the, I know what I'm looking for. It's on the share. Okay, perfect. Yay. Okay, and I don't know if it really came out because he went through that demo so quickly, but so this is an ontology about readiness, meaning how capable is a military organization how capable is it to do the assigned roles and missions? Okay, and so you have an army organization. Hopefully I can get this as large as possible here. Hold on. Okay, and I'll get through this use case pretty quickly. Just bear with me a second. So you have an army organization, a tank battalion, and they have a crew and they have equipment. So that's a crew that goes through training and has readiness reporting, and they have a tank and a main battle tank, which also goes through training. But why are they going through training? They're going through training to indication of their capability to do something like conduct maneuvers. Okay, so actually, let me go back a couple slides here. So they have a function. They all have a function. The battalion controls a tank, and the crew operates the tank, and the tank is the bearer of a maneuver function. That's why it was actually created. And the crew gets training, and they need to know how to do maneuvers too, and that's all part of the battalion, the unit's maneuver function. So you kind of break it down that way. And then over here is where we actually get data that we can actually measure about their capability to achieve that function. So they have a maneuver training status, which is just trained. So it's pretty straightforward. It's either trained or not. How do they get that? They get that status by participating in a maneuver training event. So the crew unit participates in the maneuver training event. Their capability is realized through the maneuver training event, and the maneuver training event has a code associated. So conducting maneuver has code TA1. And so if you can imagine these lines with these links to it, you can imagine another line over here with a link that has UGIL number, and other end it's code TA1. So the data is right here. Here's your data, TA1, which is the type of maneuver event. Here's you got a bunch of data over here too, and you got your data on they're trained or they're not trained. You come over here to the tank. We measure their capability. So the concept of their capability is measured through their maintenance status. Are they fully mission capable or not? Which means, and you know that by doing a maintenance action. And then this is the data that you get is FMC. But what the heck does FMC mean? There's no semantic meaning behind 3 letters FMC. But once I say it's a piece of data which measures the unit's capability to maneuver, and so I can then make that logical link. Okay, so what the heck do I do with that? Well, at a minimum, I can do more intuitive queries. So I can ask, what is the equipment rating for Battalion 001? And I can ask that almost in plain language. Tank battalion is the bearer of a capability which has equipment condition level what? And then it'll return to me T2. I'm sorry, it was R1. Equipment condition level R1. So at a minimum, I can do queries on my data, which were much more intuitive, and I can hop across the graph further in one query. As long as it's all connected in my knowledge graph, I can hop all the way across the graph to get to the information. If I know this and I can infer that, boom, I can get the answer in one query. Whereas normally our applications don't allow us to do that, especially if they're SQL based. You have to do table joins, multiple queries, blah, 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 blah. So at a minimum, we should be able to query our data more intuitively to facilitate the jobs of the cyber defenders. At a minimum, that's what we hope to be able to accomplish. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yes.
So these are like the decision support questions that we used to guide the development of this ontology. We're using a use case, but you could take the use case, you could break it down in these questions as well. But you would at least want to answer these questions, at least for this particular use case. We at least want to be able to answer these questions, which I demonstrated that we can do as long as the data is tied to the concepts in the ontology correctly. There you go. That's what we try to get at.
Right. So that's a perfect example. I'm getting an echo here. It would be nice to have that use case for posture assessment, and you could ask questions like, what assets do I have, and what's the status of those assets, and things like that. So yes, that was a great example for how the ontology works with the actual data.
That's a good point. Readiness is actually, thank you for that. Thank you for making that connection. That's actually very helpful for me to take back to SAIC, because I'll use this example and just say it's very similar to a posture assessment. That's absolutely right. I can figure out which codes and ratings and stuff like that I want to assign to which assets and users, your entire ecosystem, in order to measure that the correlation and the combination of those things in an intuitive, logical way. Because a lot of times half the battle is figuring out what the heck it is am I measuring that's useful, and how does it relate to the other things. We can collect all sorts of data in all sorts of ways, but how do we actually, what do we actually do with it that's useful and effective and follows a logical, integrating manner? So I'll go ahead and mute my mic.
Okay, go ahead, David. I was going to ask, did you want to go into the discussion on that you were talking to David Lemire may have on the SACM and some thoughts and charts on how that could be?
Yeah, we can do that. Forrest just made two things click for me. So that second, what questions do you want to answer to satisfy your use case, is one, and the entity resolution is the other. If we're going to do posture assessment, we need to have an idea of what our assets are before you can start assessing them. So entity resolution is is the job of making sense of all the data that you've got about your assets from various sources. So yeah, if Dave Lemire can talk to what he's been doing, that'd be great.
Any reason why not? So hopefully you see a title slide.
We do.
All right. So we had a meeting Monday with Adam and Bill, and talked a lot about kind of what the SACM architecture stuff was, what standing status of it was, and that involved the NSA guys and my whole team here at Huntington. So we went back then and
did some reading and did some noodling and had a brainstorming session yesterday, and this is kind of the output of all of that.
Great.
So I needed to first kind of put the whole thing in some context for myself, and so we have the PACE, Foster Attribute Collection Evaluation. We often talk about OpenC2 in the context of the Integrated Adaptive Cyber Defense's version of an OODA loop, which is the thing on the left: sensing, sense making, deciding, and acting. You know, figure out what's in your environment, figure out what it means. What does that mean in terms now of network activities, changes, configurations, actions you want to take, and then carry those actions out. And historically, we've talked about OpenC2's focus being the acting element of the IACD OODA loop. But it doesn't mean OpenC2 can't fit into other pieces of it. So if I look at PACE, the collection activities strike me as an IACD sensing function, right? We are collecting information about our environment. We're sensing what's out there and what its characteristics are. And then the evaluation piece now is sense making. The outputs of evaluation feed into deciding, and that gets you around eventually to actions. And while OpenC2, we believe, is a logical candidate for doing the actions, it can also be used to invoke these other functions, right? We can invoke the collection function. We can invoke the evaluation function. OpenC2 doesn't necessarily itself do collection or do evaluation, but it can trigger those things. This is my 100,000-foot view context. How does all this fit together? So in the SACM Architecture Internet Draft, you can find this diagram, which is illustrating an ad hoc collection activity, which is initially triggered by a manager who directs an orchestrator to do something. The orchestrator in turn directs posture collection service elements to do something. They in turn collect attributes, and all of that information winds up in a posture attribute repository. And all along the way, there can be status messages being sent about so that the manager is kept up to date on what's going on. Mm-hmm. So if I map this against OpenC2, first of all, 1 and 2 are really the same flow, right? 3 and 4 are the same flow. 5 and 6 are the same flow. You're just showing different ends of points and connecting it to the messaging fabric, which is the integration service. Well, flows 1 and 2 and flows 3 and 4 are a pretty good fit with what OpenC2 does. And this would look at like the invoking the collection function. The status messages we can certainly handle. If you look at the OpenC2 language specification, we define 3 message types: a request, a response, and a notification. And requests and responses are well-defined, fleshed out. We have use cases that support them. So that's our, our command and control capability. We have not fleshed out the notification message because we didn't have well-defined use cases for it, and there was a great deal of concern within the technical committee of not sliding over into the alerting space. But this interaction strikes me as a great use case to help us work out the OpenC2 notification capability, where it clearly is a notification and status kind of thing. It's not getting us into the alerting space at all. And I think we can use it that way. Now, interactions 5 and 6, on the other hand, they're kind of outside the scope of OpenC2 because it's really just pumping data to a collection point. But again, going back to the previous chart, doesn't mean we can't invoke that. It just means we don't maybe provide the exact mechanism to implement it. So now if I reorient this and look at it more in terms of flow among elements, I can get my way around to this picture. So the manager wants to tell the orchestrator to do some collection, and the SACM architecture says it sends collection instructions to the orchestrator. So in OpenC2, we have some high-level actions that are intended to trigger something to happen, but allow some interpretation for what that something is. So I mapped this first stage of the process to one of those actions, which is investigate. And since OpenC2 has a command response kind of structure, the response to that investigate action is going to be, got it, I'm starting on it, right? That's the immediate feedback to the manager. That's the OpenC2 handshake. And then the notification messages can go on later to say, report progress or indicate completion. So at the next stage, from the orchestrator to the posture collection service elements, I now move to a more refined OpenC2 action, which is query. And that query action now can be a whole lot more specific in terms of exactly what the orchestrator is telling the posture collection service it needs to collect and from where. And again, I can immediately close the loop with some kind of response that says, got it, working on it, and have status messages later. So now the posture collection service goes off and does posture attribute collection. That communications may go over the integration service like everything else. It may use other communications methods. It may use carrier pigeons. I don't really care. From an OpenC2 perspective, I don't care. I've moved out of that realm. I may or may not, as part of the query action, have provided any specificity of how to do this, or I may leave it to the posture collection service's own knowledge of its environment and capabilities to do that. And then, again, that last set of interactions from the posture collection service to the attribute repository from an OpenC2 perspective is undefined. We don't know how to do that. It's not really within our mission space. So now I can take a step back. In OpenC2, we talk about producers and consumers. Producers.
Hey, can you? I know we're about out of time. Could you go back and say that statement again that says it's out of your scope? What's out of your scope again?
So this part of the process here, right? OpenC2 clearly fits here. OpenC2 clearly fits here, right? I am invoking a function. I am commanding something to happen. Well, now the something is happening here, and its output is being delivered to the posture attribute repository. That's not really our turf, right? It may be in the context of this query command that I set up the parameters for where the data should go. But I'm putting the roller coaster at the top of the hill at that point and just letting it run the track, right? OpenC2 is not. I'm not saying you couldn't define these interactions in terms of OpenC2, but right now we don't have insight into that. So how the posture collection service collects and where and how it sends the data is a little over the edge of the cliff from our point of view.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it was a good question. I'm happy to clarify. So in OpenC2, we talk about producers and consumers. Producers basically send commands, and consumers accept commands and act on them. And we define our consumers with a concept we call an actuator profile. And an actuator profile basically says, for this particular function, here are the bits and pieces of the OpenC2 language that are relevant and what they mean to accomplish this function. So I might have one actuator profile for controlling a firewall and a different actuator profile for an EDR agent, things like that. So now if I look at the work we've done at Huntington with our OpenC2 prototyping efforts, we have what we call the OpenC2 Integration Framework, OIF. And we have an OIF orchestrator. The orchestrator covers a lot of the functionality that the SACM architecture allocates to the manager and orchestrator items that were on the previous page. The posture collection service looks to me now like an actuator, which means we'll need to define an actuator profile for it. And then these other elements, the right-hand side of the chart, is outside the scope of at least what OpenC2 has defined for the most part to date. But what in OIF, I have an orchestrator piece, and I have another piece I call a device. We also have another piece of software that is a different approach to an OpenC2 actuator. So we have a couple of different components that can kind of fit into that role. And so from the perspective of this prototyping effort, you know, my thinking right now is we start mapping functions to our components. We begin tailoring OpenC2 actions and targets to fit the process and begin developing this actuator profile for a posture collection service. And then we can get down to what are the messaging interactions. And even without having data formats for everything, we can at least flesh out the messaging interactions, which gets us kind of roughly back, I think, to the level of the MITRE prototype that Dave Kemp referred to earlier, right? So that's kind of the bees buzzing about. And in parallel with that, we can be sorting out and working out the information model, the data model, which we can then integrate into the messaging, and we can get from bees buzzing about to actually collecting pollen and making honey. And I think once we've reached that point, the other scenarios that are in the SACM architecture look to me like reasonably straightforward extensions to this basic ad hoc collection scenario. So Adam, you're getting a full-on preview of what we were going to bring to Monday's meeting.
Yes,
Right.
great. Yeah.
Right. In fact, I just took a note to tell Bill, be sure you watch this recording because
That's
I won't
right.
be able to do it
Thanks,
justice.
Becca.
But then
Well,
I
yeah,
figured that you're probably going to talk about it on Monday.
Yeah.
Well, and if you and Bill have watched the recording ahead of time, that will save us some time on Monday, I guess, right?
There you go.
So the other thing, looking through the SACM architecture, there are some notable conceptual disconnects between OpenC2 as currently defined and what's in that architecture. One of them is the integration service in the architecture is fairly clearly modeled on OpenDXL. And OpenDXL has both pub/sub and request response capability in this notion of service handlers. You sort of know what to do with that, but part of the problem is where the architecture calls for setting up a service handler, for the most part lands at what in OpenC2 I would consider a producer function, and our current design doesn't really allow for a consumer calling to a producer in the way the architecture seems to envision. So that's one disconnect. There's a bunch of stuff in there about how things register into the environment. And right now in OpenC2, we've kind of explicitly left that as somebody else's problem. One of the guys on my team suggested that the zero configuration stuff might be a useful thing to look at and perhaps bring into the overall prototype to help address that. And then there's several things in the architecture that are labeled as administrative interface. There's a capability advertisement. And again, that goes back to the service handler and the consumer calling a producer. OpenC2 has a query features capability where a producer can ask a consumer, what can you do for me? But it's distinctly a request response, not an advertisement approach. There's a health check function, which again, we can carry out very easily with an OpenC2 query. And then there's a heartbeat liveness function that really has no equivalent whatsoever in OpenC2, because again, it's the consumer initiating back to the producer. I guess we could do it with a notification message, but right now we don't have anything that looks like that. And then my software team also is giving some thought to well-known kind of solutions that might fit into this overall prototype and complement what OpenC2 can do, particularly with regard to that right-hand side of the flow, where we're actually collecting posture attributes and stuffing them someplace. And so either the elk stack, which was a term I had heard before, or the TIG stack, which was a new one to me when my software guys brought it to me. And I haven't had time personally to dig into the merits of any of these, so they're just kind of out there as ideas to think about right now. And then the rest is just kind of capturing in the slides what the references we were looking at were for this. That, as they say, concludes my presentation.
Well, that was very helpful. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's actually really great. I thank you very much for going through all that, and I'm sure Bill will be happy too. It's kind of exactly what we need in that whole work effort, is kind of this critical look at what we've been thinking, because we don't know everything. Perfect.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks, guys. I know we had a full meeting and we were a little over, so I apologize for that. I'm a bad meeting coordinator here. So thanks everybody for contributing, and I'll post this out tomorrow as well as my notes. And appreciate everybody's contributions. Good meeting.
You know, note on the chat, Mark said, can he come on Monday? And so we'll have to get his email or get him included.
Mike, can you take an action on that? Because
if someone could just post
forward and I got a bounce back.
Yeah, I have
I'll
his.
send it to you.
You have it? Okay, you got it.
Okay. Yep, I can add him.
All right, cool.
I'll hold the meeting until you do that, so you can read it before I take it down.
Thanks so much,
that makes
guys.
sense. Okay, hang on.
All right, have a
Put
good
me
night.
on the spot, Russ.